Marcus had always been drawn to the wilderness, but nothing could have prepared him for what he would find that scorching July afternoon along the Colorado River. The 34-year-old park ranger was conducting his routine patrol when he heard desperate, splashing sounds coming from the rapids downstream. Racing through the thick brush, Marcus spotted a young woman being swept away by the powerful current. Her long black hair whipped around her face as she fought against the rushing water. Without hesitation, he dove in, his ranger training kicking in as he battled the churning rapids. The rescue was harrowing. The woman had gone under twice before Marcus reached her, grabbing her arm just as she disappeared beneath the surface again. Using every ounce of strength, he pulled her toward the rocky shore, both of them gasping and choking on river water. On the muddy bank, Marcus performed CPR while calling for backup on his radio. The woman coughed up water and slowly opened her dark eyes, looking at him with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She appeared to be in her early 20s, wearing traditional Native American clothing that was now soaked and torn. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked gently, checking for injuries. She had several cuts on her arms and a nasty bruise on her forehead, but nothing life-threatening. The woman tried to speak, but only whispered sounds came out. She seemed disoriented, pointing toward the mountains in the distance. When the paramedics arrived, they confirmed she had mild hypothermia and dehydration, but would recover fully. At the hospital, Marcus learned something that changed everything. The woman had no identification, no memory of how she ended up in the river, and spoke very little English. The staff suspected she might be from one of the nearby Apache reservations. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician, pulled Marcus aside. "She keeps asking for you. Every time we try to get information, she just points to the door and says your name. It's like she's afraid you'll disappear." Marcus felt a strange responsibility toward the young woman. Something about her reminded him of his late sister, who had died in a car accident 5 years earlier. He decided to visit her the next day, bringing flowers and a small book of nature photographs. The woman's face lit up when she saw him enter the room. She grabbed his hand and held it tightly, speaking rapidly in what sounded like Apache dialect mixed with broken English. A hospital translator helped bridge the communication gap, revealing that her name was Ayana, which meant eternal blossom. Ayana had been living alone in the mountains for weeks, surviving on wild plants and stream water. She had fallen into the river while trying to cross during a flash flood. What struck Marcus most was her obvious intelligence despite the language barrier. She pointed to his ranger badge with recognition and drew pictures on napkins to communicate complex ideas. As visiting hours ended, Ayana became visibly distressed. She clutched Marcus's sleeve, tears streaming down her face. The translator explained that she was begging him not to leave her alone. Something had happened to her family, though she couldn't or wouldn't explain what. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Ayana's frightened eyes and the way she held on to him like he was her lifeline. He had saved people before in his career, but this felt different. There was an unspoken connection between them that he couldn't understand or ignore. The next morning brought unexpected news. The hospital social worker informed Marcus that no missing person reports matched Ayana's description, and the local Apache tribal council had no record of her. She seemed to exist in some kind of limbo, caught between worlds with nowhere to go. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He offered to become Ayana's temporary guardian, while authorities worked to uncover her identity and find her family. The paperwork was complex, but his clean record and status as a government employee helped expedite the process. When he told Ayana about the arrangement through the translator, she smiled for the first time since the rescue. She took his hand and pressed it to her heart, then to her forehead, in what he later learned was a traditional Apache gesture of deep gratitude and trust. 3 days later, Marcus brought Ayana home to his small cabin nestled in the foothills. She walked through each room with wonder, touching everything gently as if afraid it might disappear. When she saw his collection of wildlife photographs on the walls, she pointed excitedly and began naming animals in her native language. That first evening, as they sat on his porch watching the sunset, Marcus realized his quiet, solitary life was about to become something entirely different. Ayana sat close beside him, constantly glancing in his direction as if making sure he was still there. Whatever had happened to her before the river, it had left her with a deep need for security and connection. As the stars appeared overhead, Ayana began humming a haunting melody that seemed to blend with the mountain wind. Marcus felt a peace he hadn't experienced since his sister's death, as if some missing piece of his life had finally been found. He had no idea that this rescue would lead to the most challenging and rewarding journey of his life, or that Ayana's past held secrets that would test everything he thought he knew about loyalty, family, and survival. Living with Ayana proved to be both fascinating and challenging for Marcus. Every morning, he would wake to find her already dressed and waiting by the kitchen window, watching for him to emerge from his bedroom. Her dark eyes would follow his every movement as he prepared breakfast, as if memorizing his routine for future reference. Communication slowly improved through a mixture of hand gestures, simple English words, and Marcus's growing vocabulary of Apache phrases. Ayana was an eager student, pointing to objects around the cabin and repeating English words until her pronunciation was perfect. In return, she taught him about medicinal plants during their walks in the surrounding forest. What amazed Marcus most was Ayana's incredible survival skills. She could identify edible berries from 50 feet away, predict weather changes by reading cloud patterns, and move through dense brush without making a sound. When he asked where she learned these abilities, her expression would darken and she would change the subject. The constant trailing began innocently enough. Ayana would follow Marcus to his truck when he left for work, standing in the driveway until his vehicle disappeared around the bend. When he returned, she would be waiting in the exact same spot regardless of weather conditions. If he went to the mailbox, she trailed 10 feet behind. A trip to the woodshed meant she would appear at his elbow within seconds. Initially, Marcus found her devotion touching but somewhat overwhelming. He had lived alone for years and wasn't accustomed to constant companionship. However, his concern grew when he realized Ayana seemed incapable of letting him out of her sight for more than a few minutes without becoming visibly anxious. One evening, Marcus decided to test this dependency by taking a shower while Ayana was occupied with preparing dinner. Halfway through shampooing his hair, he heard frantic knocking on the bathroom door. When he didn't respond immediately, the knocking became pounding, followed by Ayana's voice calling his name with increasing panic. He quickly rinsed off and opened the door to find her trembling, tears streaming down her face. She threw her arms around his wet torso, babbling rapidly in Apache while checking his body for injuries. It took 20 minutes to calm her down, and even then she insisted on sitting outside the bathroom door whenever he needed privacy. The local grocery store became their first real public test. Marcus had been shopping alone for years, efficiently grabbing items and checking out quickly. With Ayana, the simple trip transformed into an educational adventure that lasted 2 hours. She marveled at the automatic doors, stared in wonder at the refrigerated sections, and examined every product with the curiosity of someone encountering modern civilization for the first time. Other shoppers noticed her too. Ayana's traditional clothing, which she refused to change despite Marcus offering to buy her contemporary outfits, drew stares and whispered conversations. She seemed oblivious to the attention, focused entirely on staying within arm's reach of Marcus while absorbing everything around her. At the checkout line, an elderly woman made a comment about those people that made Marcus's jaw clench. Ayana, despite her limited English, clearly understood the woman's tone and meaning. Her shoulders sagged and she moved closer to Marcus, who immediately put a protective arm around her shoulders while giving the woman a look that ended her commentary. That incident revealed another layer to Ayana's trauma. She had experienced prejudice before and it affected her deeply. On the drive home, she stared out the window silently, lost in thoughts she couldn't yet express in English. Marcus made a mental note to be more careful about where they went and who they encountered. The nights were the most challenging aspect of their arrangement. Ayana suffered from severe nightmares that would wake her screaming in Apache. The first time it happened, Marcus rushed to the guest bedroom to find her sitting up in bed, wide-eyed and sweating, frantically looking around the room as if searching for threats. When he tried to comfort her, she initially recoiled, then suddenly grabbed onto him like a drowning person clutching a life preserver. She would only calm down when he sat beside her bed until she fell back asleep. This became their nightly routine, with Marcus sometimes spending hours in the uncomfortable wooden chair beside her bed. Dr. Martinez, the counselor recommended by the hospital, explained that Ayana likely suffered from severe PTSD, related to whatever traumatic events had led to her being alone in the wilderness. The constant need to keep Marcus in sight was a common response to abandonment trauma, especially if she had lost family members in violent or sudden circumstances. "She's bonded with you as her primary source of security," Dr. Martinez explained during their session. "In her mind, you represent survival itself. Losing sight of you triggers the same fear response as facing mortal danger." Marcus learned to work with Ayana's needs rather than against them. He started taking her to work occasionally, letting her spend days at the ranger station where she could help with simple tasks while keeping him in view. His colleagues were initially skeptical, but quickly grew fond of Ayana's gentle nature and incredible knowledge of local wildlife. She had an almost supernatural ability to predict animal behavior. During a search for lost hikers, Ayana pointed toward a canyon where she claimed the missing family was waiting. The rescue team was skeptical until they found the hikers exactly where she had indicated, having followed a deer trail to safety just as she had predicted. Word of Ayana's tracking abilities spread throughout the Park Service. Other rangers began consulting her on difficult cases, always with Marcus present to translate and provide reassurance. She never asked for credit or recognition, content simply to help while staying close to the man who had saved her from the river. As autumn approached, Marcus realized that what had started as a temporary guardianship was becoming something much more permanent and profound. Ayana wasn't just trailing him out of trauma or habit anymore. She was learning to trust again, slowly building a new life around the security he provided. The question that kept him awake at night was whether he was prepared for the lifetime commitment her healing would require. Winter brought unexpected challenges that tested both Marcus and Ayana in ways they never anticipated. The first major snowfall triggered something primal in Ayana that Marcus had never witnessed before. She became hypervigilant, checking and rechecking the cabin's locks, stockpiling food in hidden corners, and insisting they keep a fire burning at all times. Her English had improved dramatically over the past few months, and she finally began sharing fragments of her story. She spoke of her grandmother, Elena, who had raised her in the old ways after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. They had lived in a remote canyon, surviving off the land and maintaining traditional Apache customs that were rapidly disappearing from reservation life. Grandmother said the old spirits still lived in the mountains. Ayana explained one evening as they sat by the fireplace. "She taught me to listen to them, to read signs that other people forgot how to see. But the spirits, they warned us about danger coming." Marcus learned that Elena had become increasingly paranoid in her final years, believing that government agents and developers were systematically driving traditional Apache families from their ancestral lands. Whether her fears were justified or the product of an aging mind remained unclear, but they had lived in constant hiding for 3 years before Elena's death the previous spring. Ayana's trailing behavior intensified during the winter months. She developed an uncanny ability to sense Marcus's location even when walls separated them. If he stepped outside to split wood, she would appear at the window within seconds. When he drove to town for supplies, she would pace the cabin relentlessly until his return, often wearing a path in the wooden floor. The breakthrough came during a particularly severe blizzard in February. Marcus woke to find Ayana missing from her bed, which sent him into an immediate panic. He searched the entire cabin twice before hearing faint sounds coming from the basement. He found her huddled in the corner behind the water heater, rocking back and forth while humming the same haunting melody she had sung on their first evening together. "The storm sounds like the night they came," she whispered when Marcus knelt beside her. "Grandmother made me hide in the cave while she faced them alone. I heard her screaming, but I was too scared to help her. When morning came, they were all gone, and our home was burned." The story came out in broken fragments over several hours. Armed men had arrived at their hidden canyon during a winter storm, claiming Elena was squatting on government property. There had been a confrontation, violence, and by dawn, Ayana was alone with nothing but the survival skills her grandmother had taught her. She had lived in the wilderness for 4 months before the day Marcus found her in the river. The constant movement, foraging for food and sleeping in different locations each night, had become her new normal. In her mind, staying stationary meant being found by the same people who had taken Elena away. "You saved me from more than drowning," she told Marcus, taking his hands in hers. "You saved me from disappearing completely." Understanding the depth of Ayana's trauma changed everything for Marcus. He stopped seeing her constant presence as clingy behavior and recognized it as a survival mechanism developed through genuine terror. Her ability to track his movements wasn't unusual attachment, but highly developed awareness skills that had kept her alive in the wilderness. Spring brought new hope and unexpected visitors. A tribal elder named Joseph Running Bear arrived at the cabin one morning, having heard stories about the Apache girl living with the park ranger. His weathered face lit up when he saw Ayanna, and they immediately began conversing in rapid Apache dialect. Joseph confirmed Ayanna's story and filled in missing details. Elena Crow Feather had been his cousin, a respected medicine woman who had chosen to live in the traditional way rather than on the reservation. The men who had destroyed their camp were likely working for a mining company that wanted access to the canyon, though no official reports had ever been filed. Elena always said if anything happened to her, Ayanna should find someone who understood the value of the old knowledge. Joseph explained to Marcus. She saw things in dreams, knew you would come before Ayanna ever fell in that river. This revelation stunned Marcus, but it explained many things about their unusual connection. Ayanna nodded solemnly, confirming that her grandmother had described a man who would save her from the water and teach her how to live in both worlds. Joseph's visit marked a turning point in Ayanna's healing process. He brought news that the mining company had abandoned their canyon project after facing legal challenges from environmental groups. The immediate danger that had driven Elena to paranoia no longer existed, allowing Ayanna to begin processing her grief without constant fear. More importantly, Joseph validated Ayanna's traditional knowledge and encouraged her to use her skills to help others. He suggested she work with the Tribal Natural Resources Department, combining her tracking abilities with modern conservation efforts. The idea of meaningful work outside the cabin excited Ayanna, though she insisted Marcus would need to be involved for her to consider any arrangement. As spring turned to summer, Ayanna's trailing behavior evolved from desperate clinging to comfortable companionship. She still followed Marcus everywhere, but now she walked beside him rather than behind, contributing to conversations and making suggestions about their activities. Her presence enhanced his work rather than hindering it, as her insights into animal behavior and weather patterns proved invaluable for park management. Local rangers began requesting Ayanna's assistance on complex cases. She could find lost hikers in record time, predict dangerous weather conditions days in advance, and communicate with injured animals in ways that amazed wildlife veterinarians. Her reputation grew throughout the region, but she remained humble about her abilities, always crediting her grandmother's teachings. The most significant change was Ayanna's growing independence within their interdependent relationship. She began taking short walks alone, initially just to the mailbox and back, but gradually extending her range as confidence returned. She would leave Marcus small gifts along the trails, flowers or interesting stones that showed she was thinking of him even when apart. Their evening conversations became the highlight of Marcus's day. Ayanna would describe the subtle changes she noticed in the forest, sharing observations that revealed the interconnectedness of all living things. Her perspective on conservation combined ancient wisdom with practical knowledge in ways that influenced Marcus's own approach to park management. By their first anniversary together, Marcus realized that Ayanna wasn't just trailing him anymore. They were walking the same path together, each contributing unique strengths to their shared journey. What had begun as a rescue had evolved into a partnership that enriched both their lives in ways neither had imagined possible. The second year of their life together brought unexpected complications when Marcus's ex-girlfriend, Rebecca, returned from her job in Denver. She had heard about Ayanna through mutual friends and arrived at the cabin unannounced, clearly expecting to pick up where she and Marcus had left off 2 years earlier. Rebecca's reaction to finding Ayanna living there was immediate and harsh. She questioned Marcus privately about his situation with the young Apache woman, making assumptions that revealed her own prejudices and jealousy. Her presence created tension that Ayanna picked up on instantly, causing her anxiety levels to spike in ways Marcus hadn't seen since the early days. "She doesn't trust me," Ayanna observed quietly after Rebecca's first visit. "Her eyes look at me like I'm something dangerous that might steal her territory." Marcus found himself caught between two very different women in two very different relationships. Rebecca represented his past life, full of urban ambitions and conventional expectations. She couldn't understand why he would sacrifice his career advancement to care for someone who wasn't even his responsibility. Ayanna, meanwhile, represented a future he had never imagined but now couldn't picture living without. Her presence had transformed his understanding of home, family, and purpose in ways that went far beyond romantic attachment. She had become his partner in the truest sense, complementing his skills while challenging his assumptions about life and relationships. The conflict came to a head during a particularly difficult rescue mission. A family of 5 had gone missing during a camping trip in the backcountry, and the official search teams had been looking for them unsuccessfully for 3 days. Marcus knew Ayanna could find them, but Rebecca insisted it was too dangerous and unprofessional to rely on superstitious tracking methods. Ayanna had been studying topographical maps and weather patterns. Combining her traditional knowledge with modern technology, she believed the family had sought shelter in a specific cave system during a sudden storm and were now trapped by fallen rocks. Her analysis was detailed and logical, but Rebecca dismissed it as lucky guessing. "You're risking your career on the hunches of someone who lived in the wilderness like a wild animal," Rebecca argued. "What happens when she's wrong and people die because you listened to her instead of following proper procedures?" The criticism stung Marcus because he knew there was some truth to the professional risks. His unconventional partnership with Ayanna had raised eyebrows among his supervisors, and another failed rescue could indeed jeopardize his position. However, his experience over the past year had taught him to trust Ayanna's instincts, especially when lives were at stake. Marcus made his choice. He authorized a small team to follow Ayanna's guidance, while the main search continued in other areas. Within 4 hours, they had located the missing family exactly where Ayanna predicted, alive but injured and unable to signal for help due to a rock slide that had blocked the cave entrance. The successful rescue made regional news and earned Ayanna official recognition from the Park Service. More importantly, it validated the unique value of combining traditional tracking knowledge with modern search techniques. Several other parks expressed interest in consulting with Ayanna on difficult cases. Rebecca's reaction to the successful rescue surprised everyone. Instead of acknowledging Ayanna's contribution, she accused Marcus of manipulating the situation to make himself look good. Her inability to accept that Ayanna possessed genuine skills revealed the depth of her insecurity and prejudice. The confrontation that ended their renewed relationship happened on a quiet Sunday morning. Rebecca had been pressuring Marcus to choose between his old life with her and his weird situation with Ayanna. She presented him with an ultimatum: either Ayanna had to leave or she would. "You've changed, Marcus," Rebecca said with frustration. "You used to have ambition, goals beyond babysitting some traumatized girl who follows you around like a lost puppy. You could transfer to a better position, move to a real city, build a proper career instead of playing house with someone who doesn't even belong in this century." Ayanna had been gathering herbs in the garden, but returned to the cabin just in time to hear Rebecca's words. Marcus watched her face carefully, knowing that such criticism could trigger the old fears and insecurities. Instead, Ayanna stood straighter, her dark eyes reflecting a confidence he hadn't seen before. "I do not follow Marcus like a lost puppy," Ayanna said clearly, her English now nearly perfect. "I walk beside him because we choose to travel the same path. If you cannot see the difference, then you do not understand what partnership means." Rebecca's shock at being directly challenged by Ayanna quickly turned to anger. She made several cutting remarks about Ayanna's background, her dependence on Marcus, and her primitive way of life. Each comment was designed to wound, to drive Ayanna back into the silence and submission that Rebecca expected from someone in her position. Ayanna listened to every word without flinching, then responded with a dignity that made Marcus proud. She explained that she had never asked Marcus to choose her over anyone else, that their relationship was built on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than possession or obligation. She also made it clear that she would leave if Marcus genuinely wanted a different life, but only if he asked her himself. "I have lost everyone I ever loved," Ayanna concluded, "but I will not hold on to someone who does not wish to be held. That is not love. That is fear, and I have learned the difference." Marcus realized in that moment that Ayanna had grown far beyond the traumatized girl he had pulled from the river. She had developed into a confident, articulate woman, who understood her own worth and wouldn't tolerate disrespect from anyone. The transformation was remarkable and humbling. His choice was clear. He told Rebecca that their relationship had ended 2 years ago when she moved to Denver, and nothing had changed except his own growth and understanding of what he wanted from life. He wished her well, but asked her to leave and not return. After Rebecca drove away, Marcus and Ayanna sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and mutual respect. "Did you mean what you said about leaving if I asked you to?" Marcus asked eventually. Ayanna considered the question carefully before answering. "I meant that I would not stay where I was not wanted. But I also know that you would not ask me to leave unless something terrible happened to change who you are inside. We are connected now in ways that go deeper than choice or convenience." That evening marked a new chapter in their relationship. They were no longer guardian and protected, rescuer and rescued, or any other unequal pairing. They had become true partners, each strong enough to stand alone but choosing to stand together because their combined strength created something neither could achieve individually. The trailing continued, but it had evolved into something beautiful. Ayanna followed Marcus not from fear or dependence but from love and shared purpose. In return, Marcus had learned to follow her lead when her knowledge surpassed his own, creating a dance of mutual support that strengthened them both. 3 years after pulling Ayanna from the river, Marcus faced the biggest professional opportunity of his career. The National Park Service offered him a promotion to regional director, overseeing conservation efforts across multiple states. The position would mean relocating to Washington, D.C., substantial salary increase, and recognition as one of the country's leading wilderness experts. The offer came with a catch that everyone understood, but no one mentioned directly. The position required someone who could navigate political environments, attend formal functions, and represent the service at congressional hearings. Ayanna's unconventional background and their unique living arrangement would be seen as professional. Liabilities in the capital's conservative political climate. Marcus stared at the official letter for hours before showing it to Ayanna. Her reaction surprised him with its complexity. He had expected either excitement about the opportunity or fear about the changes it would bring. Instead, Ayanna read the letter carefully, asked thoughtful questions about his responsibilities, and then sat quietly for a long time before speaking. "This is what you studied for in college, isn't it?" she asked finally. "The chance to influence conservation policy for the entire country, instead of just our small piece of forest." Marcus nodded, touched that she understood the significance of the offer. Few people realized how much he had sacrificed by staying in a remote ranger position, content to work in obscurity while less qualified administrators advanced to policy-making roles. "What would happen to our work here?" Ayanna continued. "The search and rescue training program we started, the wildlife tracking studies, the partnership with the Tribal Natural Resources Department." Those were exactly the questions keeping Marcus awake at night. Over the past year, they had developed innovative programs that combined traditional Apache tracking methods with modern technology. Their success rate in locating missing persons had improved dramatically, and several other parks were implementing similar approaches. More importantly, they had created something neither had expected when their partnership began. Their small cabin had become an unofficial training center where park rangers learned traditional survival skills, while tribal members gained experience with modern equipment and procedures. The cultural bridge they had built was fragile and would likely collapse without their continued presence. Ayanna's trailing behavior had evolved into something that made their professional partnership incredibly effective. She could read his moods and anticipate his needs during stressful situations, while he provided the official authority and technical resources that gave weight to her traditional knowledge. Separating them would diminish both their individual effectiveness and their revolutionary approach to wilderness management. The decision deadline approached while Marcus wrestled with competing loyalties. His career ambitions pulled him toward Washington, but his heart remained tied to the mountains and the woman who had become central to his life's work. The choice felt impossible because either option required sacrificing something essential. Ayanna seemed to sense his internal conflict and began preparing for his departure in subtle ways that broke his heart. She started teaching other rangers advanced tracking techniques, ensuring her knowledge wouldn't be lost when she was no longer available. She also began spending more time with Joseph Running Bear, discussing the possibility of working directly with the tribal council on conservation projects. "You don't have to sacrifice yourself for my comfort," she told Marcus one evening when she caught him staring at the letter again. "I survived alone before we met, and I could do it again if necessary. But I don't think that's what either of us really wants." Her words forced Marcus to confront the real source of his hesitation. He wasn't just worried about leaving Ayanna behind. He was terrified of losing the person he had become since their lives intertwined. The ambitious, solitary ranger who had pulled her from the river no longer existed. In his place stood a man who understood the interconnectedness of all things, who valued wisdom over prestige, and who had found purpose in service rather than advancement. The breakthrough came during another rescue mission that showcased everything their partnership had accomplished. A group of geology students had become trapped in an abandoned mine during a research expedition. The official rescue team estimated it would take days to safely extract them using conventional methods. Ayanna studied the mine's original blueprints and identified a forgotten ventilation shaft that could provide faster access. However, reaching the shaft required navigation skills that no one possessed except her. Marcus coordinated the technical aspects while Ayanna guided the rescue team through treacherous terrain in complete darkness. The rescue succeeded brilliantly, but not without personal cost. During the operation, Ayanna had to crawl through a narrow passage to reach the trapped students, triggering claustrophobic panic that connected to her memories of hiding from her grandmother's attackers. She completed the mission successfully but emerged from the mine shaking and disoriented. Marcus found her later that night sitting by the river where he had first rescued her, staring into the dark water with tears streaming down her face. She had never looked more vulnerable or more brave than she did in that moment. "I thought I was trapped again," she whispered when he sat beside her. "For a few minutes in that tunnel, I was 12 years old again, hiding in the cave while terrible things happened to the person I loved most." They held each other in the darkness, while Ayanna processed the trauma that would always be part of her story. But Marcus also recognized something else in her courage during the rescue. She had faced her deepest fears to save strangers, demonstrating a strength that had nothing to do with dependence or trailing behavior. "You don't need me anymore," Marcus said softly, the realization hitting him with surprising sadness. "You've grown into someone who could lead these missions herself." Ayanna pulled back to look at him directly. "That's not why I stay with you, Marcus. I don't trail you because I need you to survive. I choose to walk beside you because together we can help more people than either of us could alone. But if you need to walk a different path, I understand." Her words contained both permission and invitation. She was strong enough to let him go if necessary, but hopeful enough to suggest alternatives he hadn't considered. That night, Marcus began drafting a response to the National Park Service that would surprise everyone, including himself. Instead of accepting or declining the promotion, he proposed a different arrangement. He suggested creating a new position that would allow him to develop and oversee innovative wilderness programs from a regional base while remaining in the field. The role would combine policy development with hands-on implementation, using his partnership with Ayanna as a model for similar collaborations across the country. The proposal was unprecedented and risky. It challenged conventional hierarchies and suggested that effective conservation required embracing traditional knowledge rather than dismissing it. Marcus knew the bureaucrats in Washington might reject the idea entirely, but he also knew it represented the future of his profession. As he sealed the envelope containing his counterproposal, Marcus felt more certain about his direction than he had in years. He wasn't running away from advancement. He was redefining what advancement meant. Success would be measured not by his distance from the work he loved, but by his ability to expand its impact while staying true to its values. 6 months after Marcus submitted his unconventional proposal to the National Park Service, the phone call came that would change everything. Director Patricia Hawkins herself called to inform him that his innovative program had been approved for a 3-year pilot phase. The traditional knowledge integration initiative would be tested across 5 Western parks, with Marcus as the program coordinator and Ayanna as the lead cultural consultant. The news meant they could stay in their beloved mountains while expanding their work to help other parks develop similar partnerships with indigenous communities. More importantly, it validated their belief that combining ancient, Wisdom with modern conservation methods created solutions neither approach could achieve alone. Ayana's reaction to the news revealed how much she had grown since those early days of fearful dependency. Instead of relief at not having to separate from Marcus, she immediately began planning how they could best serve the new program's goals. Her focus had shifted from personal security to professional purpose, though she still unconsciously reached for Marcus's hand during moments of excitement or stress. The first year of the pilot program brought challenges that tested their partnership in new ways. They traveled extensively, visiting parks across Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Montana. Each location required adapting their methods to different tribal traditions, terrain conditions, and administrative cultures. In Yellowstone, they worked with Shoshone elders to develop bear safety protocols based on traditional knowledge of seasonal behavior patterns. Ayana spent weeks learning from tribal historians, while Marcus navigated the complex bureaucracy required to implement new procedures. Their different strengths complemented each other perfectly, with Ayana building trust within indigenous communities while Marcus handled official approvals and training programs. The success stories mounted steadily. In Utah, their collaboration with Navajo Rangers reduced search times for missing hikers by 60%. In Montana, Blackfeet traditional fire management techniques helped prevent 3 major wildfires. Each success strengthened their professional reputation and deepened their personal bond. However, the constant travel also revealed that Ayana's trailing behavior served a deeper purpose than anyone had realized. In unfamiliar environments, she became Marcus's early warning system, reading subtle social and environmental cues that helped him avoid